Hello everyone. So my title is Embracing Plurality in Action. Okay? We'll keep this apart for a few seconds, and I will tell you that I have a secret to share with you. Now, before I move on to my secret, I have a question for you. How many of you have heard the following sayings in Hindi or in English? That the one who rows too many boats does not go across the shore. Or, somebody telling you, don't be a jack of all and a master of none. How many of you have heard that? Do these things sound familiar? Yes, great. I can't see many of you, but I trust you. Second is, if for those of you who did not raise their hands, how many of you have heard or experienced people assigning you labels? You are like this, or you are like that. You're arrogant, too sincere, too honest. How many of you have experienced other people assigning you labels? Show of hands. And for those of you who did not raise hands, maybe you are the ones assigning labels to other people throughout the day. But that's a thing. So, why is it important to know this? It's important because this shows us one thing. It shows us the obsession of our society with singularity. Now, what does singularity mean? It means the idea of linearity. One thing could exist only in one paradigm, only in one plane, and with an inflexible approach. You see, so that's the idea of singularity most of us have grown up with. For example, if you have taken sciences, stick to sciences. If you are good at sports, stick to sports, you see. So the entire idea of singularity, linearity, just being one thing at a time has always been present in our society, right? And it is a dangerous thing. It's not a very good thing. Because you see, first of all, we all have the possibility of being more than one thing at a time, being more than a person at a time. And as somebody who has worked extensively on the notion of identity, I can tell you that we never have just singular identities. Identities exist in plural matrices. So that's a very important concept. But good news here is that things change. Now, for those of you who have studied thermodynamics, you know that the entropy of a system, entropy means the randomness, increases with time. Now, same logic more or less applied here means that we across centuries as a world, as societies, have learned to step back from the extremities, the polarities of what could just exist as binary, and we have found our ways to more multiple existence of phenomena. For example, the very simple example would be that of diet. Decades ago, or even maybe centuries ago, the only possible diet or diets that we could hear of were vegetarian, non-vegetarian. Today you have a whole wide range of that, Vegetarians, ovo-lacto-vegetarians and vegans and whatnot. Another example of the same thing would be race. Now in Europe, for a very, very long time, the only two kinds of people that were to be seen were the pure race, quote-unquote, pure race, the whites, and the impure race, anybody who was an immigrant, right? But that changed. With all the mixed marriages, mixed couples, people adopting, everything changed, and now you have people who are neither quote-unquote pure nor quote-unquote impure in their race because they have hybrid genes, right? The same thing can be seen with the relationships. Now, some of you, actually most of you would be too young to understand this, but in terms of relationships, what you had many decades ago was just the simple notion of married, unmarried, single, in a relationship, and thanks to our generation, we have something new. We have it's complicated, which is in between the two extremes. We have also between married and unmarried people who are polygamous and whatnot, you see. So again, going from the extremities of black and white and finding something that goes in between and something that takes on to both the sides of the spectrum, right? Another example is that of sexualities. Between heterosexual and homosexual, you would have pansexuals, panamorous, demisexuals, sapiosexuals, and whatnot. And then the most relatable example for me would be that of work, Between online and offline, you have today hybrid mode of working. So why did I spend my time listing all these examples? Is to tell you that there is a social phenomenon when society tends to go from all that's extreme, all that's polar, and find in a way a middle path. Now, before we judge too quickly and get on to this hasty conclusion of calling all this a Western influence, the idea is to understand that it is not, these are not Western notions, because it is something that is also very, very prominent in the Indian culture, or in the Eastern culture broadly. It's the method suggested by the wise Buddha, right? So the wise Buddha spoke of the middle path, and that middle path for me is what is essential in this notion of embracing plurality. Now, before we move on to the idea of plurality, it's important to understand what happens if I don't embrace plurality. Are there any dangers? And of course, the answer is yes, there are dangers. And what those dangers might be? Well, it starts with you. Now, I don't know how many of you believe in the idea of manifesting your own destiny. Do you? I mean, have you heard of this concept? Yes? And you believe in it? Yes? If you don't believe in the idea of manifesting destiny, you at least believe in the idea of karma, putting things into action, which will decide then, the later course of your life. Now, my thing is, how do you put something into action? How do you fully manifest something if you can't even see that, if you're blinded by your labels, right? So first danger is for you and for us in general. And this danger is also there because restricting yourself to the singularity of labels blocks your perspective, and it gives you a limiting and limited mindset. Now, how do you put things into action when you just can't even see the field clearly and you cannot see the entirety of the playing field? So when you don't see the entirety of the playing field, you just restrict yourself to a narrow play zone, and that's, I think, the first danger that we all risk suffering if you do not embrace the notion of plurality, right? The second level of danger comes in the interpersonal relationships. Because with this singularity of ideas, this restricted mindset, what we do is that we tend to put people in boxes, right? An example could be that of immigration. Why do you think there is so much racism? Just because we see the other person and we tell ourselves, oh, he's from that community, he must be in a certain way. Oh, look, he's from a certain religion, he must be acting in a certain way. So what I mean by this is that boxing people based on those labels and based on that narrow perception of what people can be leads to what we call stereotypes. And these stereotypes, in turn, lead to rejection, right? And rejection, as we know, is a dangerous thing because in society we have already very conflicting positions, media, politicians, and different ideologies. We do not need more of conflict. So that's a certain thing, right? So, not embracing plurality leads you to the risk of rejection of the other. But it doesn't stop there. It goes farther than that. And where it goes is that it also leads to your own rejection. A self-inflicted rejection, if I may. How many times you saw somebody in a bar, or in your classrooms, on the playground, or on a dating app, and you thought to yourself, you see, I won't bother talking to this person. They are anyway out of my league. Been there? Well, you won't admit to this because your teachers are there, but I know. So, yes, most of the times we just, self-inflict these kind of rejections on ourselves, thinking that, oh, you see, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I'm not pretty enough, not interesting enough, and why should I even bother talking to this person given that they're out of my league? And this, again, this rejection is something dangerous for our own self, right? So, given all these dangers, what's important here is to understand the fundamental notion that I'm trying to defend here. Now, first of all, I am not against labels. I'm really not against labels because labels is something that in the society have allowed us to navigate through the world, right? Because with every label, there is a social contract. Another simple example, how do you know that your love for your parents is different from your love for your boyfriend or girlfriend? How do you know that your love for your cousin is different from the love that you have for your mother? Because with these labels comes a social contract, and that's what makes the socialization easier, that's what makes the social navigation possible, right? How do you know you don't have to do certain things at work? How do you know you don't have to do certain things at home? It's because there's a label, and that label carries a social contract, and that allows you to navigate through it. So again, in this talk, I'm not here to blame labels. But what I'm here to do is, I'm here to promote the idea of embracing a multiplicity of labels. That's one. And the idea of choosing your own labels. And maybe not let others define what those labels should be for you. Take control of those labels for yourself. That's the one fundamental thing that I would like to focus on. And second thing is reassigning new meanings. Redefining those labels is something very, very important. So if you see that, reassign meanings to your pre-existing labels, and this in turn will give you a wider perspective to view things, right? And now one would want to ask, but then how do you know that it works? How do you know that it's going to be a successful thing to do? Well, because it's not just me, it's all these people who have been on the same journeys. So Da Vinci, painter, inventor, polymath, great figure in Europe, known for all he did during the Renaissance period. So he wore all those labels with elegance, and then he made the most out of it. Now, more closer to home is Tagore, or Rabindranath Tagore, if I use the non-colonized pronunciation. A man whose versatility and plurality knew no bounds. Poet, writer, musician, artist, philosopher, and a social reformer, right? So, you see, we have had people in the history who have embraced plurality in all that they could be and have gone forward with it, and that's what led to a better world, right? And I think the most powerful example in this context would be that of this lady there, Helen Keller, right? Who is Helen Keller? She was born in America, and when she was 19 months old, she lost her sight and she lost her ability to hear. Now you see, as a child, she must have been subjected to a lot of labels, right? But then she chose to get rid of all the negative ones, and she chose to redefine it for herself. Now, the important question you may all ask is, but then what additional benefit do I get out of embracing plurality? And well, there is a list. Now, let's go through these benefits one by one. The very first one is being your authentic self. Now, most of the times you must have heard when people come and tell you, oh, you know, we are all different. And my question is, yeah, are we? We all carry the same trauma, we all carry more or less the same self-doubt, we all carry more or less the same struggle. So aren't we very, very similar on those lines? So there has been a disconnect between establishing a differentiated individual identity for everyone, but not finding a concrete, substantial ground to prove it. But embracing plurality allows you to reinvent yourself and be the most authentic version of yourself that you can ever be. And how does that work? It simply works because once you have a multiplicity of labels, your attachment to each one of those labels would be varying. And even if two people have exactly the same labels, the level of attachment, the level of identification to each label would be different. And that's what, since two people cannot have the exact same degree of reliance or identification with a label, no two people can be the same in a given society. So it allows you to be the most authentic self and reinvent your creativity, your identity, right? Second is it allows you to reduce interpersonal conflict. Most of the conflict happens because we see the other person, we fit that person in a box, and then we are not ready to accept anything that goes beyond that label, anything that goes beyond that box, right? And that's what leads to conflict. And embracing plurality helps you understand, okay, this is a person, he comes from so-and-so culture, he comes from so-and-so background, but there is a possibility that he may not exactly turn out to be what I think he's going to turn out to be. So it, in a way, indirectly instills more trust in your relationships. That's one. Third is better learning, better education. I mean, this is unnecessary to say because today we have been emphasizing a lot on interdisciplinary and pluridisciplinary programs, right? We understand that modern day problems require modern day solutions, and that could only happen through careers which embrace plurality. And one of the examples of that we have already started to see, that's the example of slashers. You have an engineer slash philanthropist, a doctor slash poet, a teacher slash fashion designer, and whatnot. You see? So future's problems won't be solved with today's solutions. I mean, it has to be something more. It has to be something more plural, more diverse. And I think embracing plurality helps us solve tomorrow's challenges better because it integrates all the important factors, right? So, and the last thing is that it allows you to be more adaptive, right? Because once you have redefined the meaning and reassigned new meaning to the pre-existing labels, or once you have taken up new labels, it allows you to adapt to circumstances better, to newer situations better. And as I leave you, I would like to leave you with an exercise, and this is what I request you to do. When you go back home, take some time, sit, take a few deep breaths, and observe. Observe what are the labels that you carry. List them out. Then observe which of these labels are self-attributed. Next, observe which of these labels were given to you by others. And then, one of the final steps, decide which are the labels that you're going to keep and which are the labels that you're going to discard, right? And for the labels that you are going to keep, I would request you to reassign a new meaning to them so that your labels do not become limiting factors, but liberating factors for you. Thank you.